Announcement has been posted. All right. Hello everyone. Welcome to the Storytime Network's very own Paradox Hour. Today we're actually living up to our name of having a rotating cast of hosts by rotating our hosts. And joining us today in our retrospective of the Stormlight archive.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello there. Oh dear.
We're too afraid to take the knife from it, honestly.
It's
Hey.
very dangerous.
Ducks are scary.
Also true, in general.
Oh yeah. That's a thick book. I think it's
So-
more of a tome, to be honest.
You could kill a man with any of the stories, to be honest.
They're all 1,000+ pages. My God.
Well, you know, they were all written as basically 3 books.
This
So
is true.
They are basically the equivalent of 3 books sewn together, individually. Oh God.
3 books plus a novelette.
For those of you keeping track at home, The Way of Kings in audiobook time is 45 hours and 30 minutes.
They
Yeah.
just get longer.
So the Way of Kings is divided up into a few different perspectives. The 3 primary perspectives are of Kaladin, Shallan, and Dalinar.
Shallan.
Shallan.
That's how
Shallan.
that's how the audiobooks pronounce it.
So I hadn't listened to the audiobook. Oh, there's also Zeth. Is that how you pronounce it? Seth? Or Seth?
Zeth.
Zeth. His name is spelled funny, okay?
It's an SZ next to each other, so
It's not something you normally see in the English language.
Zeth's son Villano.
Yeah. So those 4 are our main perspective characters in this book. No, I did say Dalinar, yes. Kaladin is the main viewpoint character in the story in this particular volume, and he is the one whose flashbacks and main arc we follow the most.
Oh, yes.
Oh yeah, no, Kaladin has a rough time throughout this book.
Kaladin has a rough time in all of the books.
You know, I feel
It's really bad here.
I feel like we should take a moment just to clarify for the those new to the series that The Way of Kings and all of the Stormlight archive are each structured with each book having these 3 primary arcs, but then there's also this little flashback sequence that expounds on the history of one of the characters. Whoa!
Oh no!
Whoa!
Oh
It
no!
wouldn't be a stream of this without it.
Hang on. Can we just get some confirmation from whoever's watching whether or not my mic is coming through? Because apparently my mic has not come through.
Oh no, that's not good.
Which means we may have to restart the stream. Just to... Okay. Well, my bad, everyone.
Anyways,
Okay, no, from what I can tell,
so...
the intro did come in, but just to be safe, I'm going to reintroduce us all. We have Aerith swapping in for Mill.
Hi.
We have Gen coming back after a leave of absence.
Hello again.
We have Jack.
Hello.
And we have this really, like, creepy, fluffy thing just staring at us from the corner. It found a knife somewhere, and we just can't seem to get rid of it.
We're
not going to try to take away the knife. It's a bad idea.
Yeah, okay.
It's a tonberry.
Yeah, that's, I think, all that I had to add to that conversation, so I believe the rest is still up. Let's just keep going and pretend that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Anyways, so yeah, it has a 3-act structure, but each book has 3 main arcs, but each book has a 5-act structure because each book is broken up into 5 parts with interludes, a prologue, and an epilogue.
Because that's not confusing at all.
Yeah. And the prologues for each of the Stormlight Archive books all center around this like inciting incident that happened several years ago. The assassination.
Oh, well, actually, Way of Kings opens with a prologue.
Prelude.
Oh, yeah, the prelude. Yes.
Stormlight Archive. Which puts us, I think, 4,500 years in the past.
Something around that, like just a stupid amount of time in the past, because, you know, epic fantasy, that's just how it goes, huh?
Hey, you know, when you're building epic fantasy, you just try to fit it all in there as best you can, right?
Yeah. And we just get thrown a lot of just like proper nouns at us all at the very start. It's great.
Says the girl writing an epic fantasy book. Oh boy.
I'm pretty sure
and there's very little explanation.
I'm pretty sure of the 4 people in this call right now, 3 are currently writing an epic fantasy book.
Yep. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, Gen's the onward in this situation.
So yes, sorry for interrupting. Please go on.
So yeah, the prelude is a whole lot of stuff that we don't really catch a lot of the meaning at first. A lot of the stuff mentioned in the prelude is not clear until later in the series, so we're not going to dwell on that too much.
Some of it much later.
Yes.
Some of it we still don't know
much
about.
Later.
No. But the prologue covers the assassination of one King
Gavilar.
Gavilar
is the baby.
I'm sorry, it's been a while since I've read this particular book. But Gavilar being assassinated by Zed, who gives us our introduction to the signature magic of the series.
Are you still speaking, or have you cut out?
Oh yeah, no, I stopped.
Okay, so
does anyone want? Yeah.
So to pick up where you left off, an interesting thing about, for those who are unaware of who Brandon Sanderson is, his whole thing is that all of his disparate fantasy series with their own magic systems take place in the same universe, and there's an overarching plot line and common characters that hop between the worlds, as well as each individual storyline, and we'll get to that later, but just for the time being, bear in mind that the magic system, Surge Binding, is not necessarily unique to this universe in the sense that it's just part of a larger overarching magic system.
Mm-hmm. The idea is that all the magic systems they all operate the same way at a very macro scale, but they present differently.
Yep.
Like if you zoom out far enough, they're all the same. But if you zoom in,
if you zoom in far enough, it's the same as well.
Yeah, true.
With the Stormlight Archive, though, the magic system is based off of the titular Stormlight, which is basically
light that comes from a storm.
Light that gets and it gets infused into these spheres or gems that that people carry around, and that is often used as currency in the within the setting. And the way and people who could use the magic system draw out the energy from the spheres and use that to fuel their magic. Pretty straightforward. Until you get to the fact that there are 10 different groups that each use 2 different kinds of magic. And each group shares 1 magic with another group. So,
there's 10
each group can use 2.
There's magics. 10 flavors of magic total as well.
Each of the 10 groups can use 2 of them.
It's like really convoluted, but it makes sense when as explained. But anyway, Szeth just murders the king dead, but also comes from a very specific culture with very, very strict rules and norms, and as a result passes on his dying words in writing, which is holy for his people, except Gavilar is a member of a religion, and basically the dominant religion on the planet, where men are forbidden from writing and reading, and women are forbidden from basically doing anything but writing and reading. It's a bit more nuanced than that, but basically sexism.
It's like sexism culture.
So, like, sexism in the real world, really, is what it comes down to.
You know, it's really interesting, though, because you have, you know, the way that it's segregated so distinctly in the society, where men are pretty much, you know, men are the businessmen and the warriors and the, you know, rulers, but women are the scribes and artists and musicians and scholars, and you know, and almost everything like that makes a society not just function but exist. And so it's really interesting.
Yeah, the men are basically just there to poke each other with sharp bits of metal.
Yeah, the men are supposed to do the big, brawny, meaty jobs mostly, and the women are supposed to do the intellectual jobs and artistic jobs.
And also, men are illiterate. Like, they cannot read.
Yeah.
Unless they join the clergy.
Yeah, the clergy are
allowed. And also, there's the class structure is also incredibly rigid, where it's not based on skin color but eye color. And
so if you have light eyes, you are upper class, and if you have dark eyes, you are lower class.
And each
then you
has 10 like strata levels,
subdivisions.
Dawn for
the non for the light eyes, dawn for the dark eyes.
Dawn is light eyes, non is dark eyes.
Oh, really? I thought it was.
Okay. It's confusing. So there's a lot of. So I would like to note we're throwing out a lot of proper nouns, and we've covered the prelude and the prologue of a 1,000. So we've covered like the first 10 to 20 pages of an 1,100-page book. We're making great time so far.
It's great. Read this book, guys. It's wonderful.
It'll take a while, but it's worth it.
Also, it's just as a note, it's only like $2.99 on the Kindle store.
Is it
really?
Yes, it's like promotionally. A lot of series do this, where the first in the series is just very cheap. You know, the first hit's always free.
Also, I'll point out that even though it's a ridiculously long book and it's a ridiculously long series, it's not like you sit there and spend, you know, hundreds of pages on descriptions either. You know, like, I love The Wheel of Time. I love Robert Jordan, but man, he could get verbose with those descriptions at times.
That's a nice way of putting it, yes.
Almost
not as bad as someone like
Martin describing food.
Right, or like someone like Terry Brooks, where he literally spends 30 pages describing one scene.
Are you fucking serious?
Oh my god, I want to die.
I mean, there's a lot of things about Terry Brooks that elicit the "oh my god, I want to die" reaction. That's
at least he's not good kind.
This is true. Thank God he's dead.
They're both named Terry, huh?
Yeah, they are.
I don't want to know.
Terry Brooks is Shannara, whereas Terry Goodkind is the
Sword of Truth.
Sword of Truth, that's it.
Okay, so the only good Terry who's a famous fantasy author is Terry Pratchett. Got it.
Yes.
Pretty much.
But back to the Stormlight Archive and why it's the best.
Well,
hands down.
It's great, but I will note that I don't think anyone here other than me has finished Rhythm of War, so, you know, hold your overall judgment.
But you're also probably the most critical of anything out of all of us.
Yeah, but okay, you know that even though I'm critical of things...
Let's put that on the back burner for now. Let's put that on the back burner.
Way of Kings is great.
Way of Kings.
We're just on Way of Kings. Book.
And so we get this, after we get the prologue, the prelude and the prologue, we then get introduced to our boy, Kaladin.
Who is totally not a paladin, guys.
He's not a paladin.
Definitely not Kaladin the paladin.
We only get introduced to him, though, in the third person for the first book, or for the first chapter.
Oh, yeah. The first chapter takes place
from the perspective of a boy named Sen.
Who dies immediately.
I completely forgot about... Wow, that kid's entire purpose was to die, huh?
That kid's entire purpose was to show us how awesome Kaladin is.
And then die.
And then
die horribly.
To be fair, that's a lot of characters' sole job.
Yeah, no, it's a pretty common trope to just...
I mean, I take wins for Kaladin where I can get them.
Yeah, Kaladin is a great character, but his arc throughout most of this book is just really rough to read through, because that dude has some serious depression.
And PTSD.
Let's
not forget the PTSD. And as someone with both of those conditions...
He also has seasonal depression, which is also great.
Oh, seasonal affective disorder, yeah.
He's just not in for a good time because his brain just hates his guts.
Yeah. So this is the thing about the Stormlight Archive that I think all of us can attest to is, at least for the first 3 books, each of the characters they talk about all suffer from some kind of mental illness. And for me, as someone who suffers from mental illness, and I don't want to speak for everybody else, but like, it's been really good to kind of have characters who have to process depression on page and have that be a thing and not be stigmatized for it, but rather be like, have to work through it and have it be a tough road, but not sorry.
No, go ahead.
But like, it's never treated as a failure. It's never treated as like just kind of like thing to be hidden. It's a thing that they need to work through and deal with, but it's never.
Yeah, it's a substantial part of the story, and it's not like in other types of fiction, other types of even fantasy fiction, where the mental illness is just like glossed over as like, oh, this person is, has this, and it's like a brief scene where they have to deal with it, and then it's back to the adventure. It's a substantial part of each character's journey is dealing with these conditions and with these problems that they have. And it's honestly, as someone who struggles with a couple different conditions, it's just so gratifying to see that given honest portrayal, in such a big fictional presence, Kaladin struggles with depression and PTSD. There's another character that's introduced just a couple chapters later named Shallan Devar, who suffers from dissociative identity disorder and PTSD. PTSD seems to be a common thing.
PTSD is the general, like it's a very traumatic world. Roshar is a very traumatic world in general.
It is.
Oh yeah, no, it's a crapsack world par excellence.
Also, like Shalon also has anxiety. She's generalized anxiety.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
You have Dalinar Blackthorn Colin, who suffers primarily from PTSD and survivors and amnesia.
But that has a different explanation.
So I think that's an important thing to note, is that unlike a lot of series, which you guys have been talking about, but unlike a lot of series, yes, people have magic powers. Magic powers does not make mental illness go away magically.
No.
Like the cool thing about this, like about the Stormlight, is that like part of what allows them to have magic powers is because they have mental illness.
Just trauma, which is kind of general.
It's kind of the flip of what you usually see in fantasy, where it's like the people who, struggle with things like this are usually, it's either like so bad that you're like, oh my gosh, how are you still alive? Or it's, like, oh, when I was 5, I cut my finger and my parents didn't bandage it, and that's why I'm,
That's why I'm evil. That's why I'm
right. Evil. Right. And it's, and it's not like that in this series. It's very, very dedicated to it.
The theme with magic in this series is that a new person cannot be forged until they are first broken, I believe. Probably the way I would word it. And pretty much all the magic users in this series are, to some degree, a little broken inside. Because
every single one's got some kind of thing that they need to work through and understand in order to progress.
And like that's the trick with the magic system, is like part of the way someone grows with the magic is by swearing oaths. That's why we were joking, like Kaladin is a paladin. He swears oaths as he gains in strength.
Not just strength, though, as he gains self-awareness and understanding of himself and what his what he needs to do.
Right, and they all swear and there's very much the sense of like Kaladin at one point asks like, I can't be this thing you want, to the person he's binding himself to, and that individual is like, are you kidding? The old ones were all broken too. You're not alone. Yeah.
So the idea is that it's that the idea of the magic system is that it's magical kintsugi for people, which, for those who are not necessarily familiar, kintsugi, I believe that I have no idea. I'm butchering the pronunciation. It's the
kintsugi.
Yeah, it's the Japanese art form of repairing clay pottery with things often molten gold, so that the cracks are just filled in with something stronger and more beautiful. That's basically the literal.
It's basically making beauty from the flaws instead of hiding them.
Considering who the quote unquote gods of Roshar are, that makes a ton of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
really does, doesn't it? Though that's getting into deeper Cosmere stuff, which I feel like is going to need its own episode. So
for sure,
we're going to need multiple episodes.
We're absolutely going to have, after we're done with our book coverage, we're absolutely going to have some Realmatics and Cosmere episodes.
I love the Cosmere.
Cosmere is really fun. We need a Mistborn episode. You know what? We need a Mistborn episode.
I love Mistborn.
We're going to need more than one episode for Mistborn, Jack. Remember who we're talking to.
A special place in my heart.
Mistborn is what got me into Sanderson, but that's besides the point.
I mean, I'm pretty sure Mistborn is what got Sanderson into Sanderson.
This is true.
Yeah, but anyways, back to Stormlight. When we actually meet Kaladin from his perspective, he's basically at his lowest point, or very close to it.
Or what he thinks is, anyway.
He's contemplating suicide. Like, he is full-on suicidal. He is a slave. He is being carted off to a war camp to be basically sent to die for basically no cause whatsoever.
So So, and it's important to note here that so we have our prelude, which is like 3,500 years before the start of the story. I think I said 4,500 before, but I think it's 3,500.
It's 4,500.
Is it 4,500? Okay.
It's 4,500 years.
Okay. But then we have our prologue, which is like 5 or 6 years before the main events of the series.
Yep.
And then we have the chapter 1, which is from Sen's point of view, which is again like another 8 months before our first viewpoint chapter of Kaladin.
Yep.
So we don't get introduced to our was effectively our main character from his perspective until a good 40 pages into the book.
Right. And by that point, it's Kaladin appears on screen and he is a slave in a slaver's wagon, basically on his way like I don't remember who said it, but on his way to the Shattered Plains to be, sold. And it's through that journey there that we learn about, things like the high storms that blow through Roshar, which are these storms that go across the entire world on every few days, and just, really strong winds, lots of rain, lots of, storm, and that can cause all sorts of problems. And it's caused the ecology on Roshar to evolve in unique ways. And, and it's during this same sequence that we also learn about,
how
the most, I'd say the most unique aspect of Roshar, which is the Spren.
Oh, yeah, the Spren. Speaking of Spren, we are introduced to a particular Spren during the sequence.
A wind Spren, quote unquote, which are shape-shifting Spren that just wander around on the wind, but often they can take basically any shape, but they sometimes take the shape of people and can mimic basic sounds and things like that. So we're introduced to what we believe is one of those.
Yep. And we learn that not only is she a wind Spren, yes, it's a she, and she introduces herself as Sylphrena. And somehow, despite having never spoken to Kaladin that we are aware of, she knows his name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's not some sort of foreshadowing or special circumstances at all. No, it's just a basic wind Spren, guys. Come on. But yes, he is. Here we get one of his defining character moments. Really, in this slaver's wagon. Of course, the slave mentality they're basically all been broken down to avoid resisting and even turn against each other. So, what Kaladin ends up realizing is that one of the slaves in the wagon is sick with...
He's got the fiddlepox.
Which is essentially an easily diagnosed... I'd say it's the equivalent of the common cold, but that kind of comes into play later on. So
it's kind of like whooping.
It's really the whooping cough, yeah. And we realize, based on his just calm, detached diagnosis, that Kaladin, at the very least, has medical training if he's not a former medical professional himself. And he tries to bring this to the attention of the slaver, who has the slave killed because...
He's the man of many talents.
So the slaver has the man killed because it would cost more to keep the slave alive than he'd expect to get from selling the slave.
Mm-hmm.
Mind you, it's not like they're treating them particularly well in the first place. I mean, they're getting, scant meals of slop, basically, and they get a couple ladles of water every day. That's not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm pretty sure mention is made that the livestock is treated better than they are.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Which also, all of the livestock here are disgusting crab things. Yes. What Hoyt said.
Crabs.
There's just so many crabs. I have to imagine I would love to sample Rosharan cuisine.
Well,
So
but you would have to try the spicy stuff, Fuzzy.
I mean, I feel like Roshan, like Alkar, is very much like Indian cuisine. Like that's the sense I got from it.
Well, yeah, but it's less the cooking style and more the ingredients. You know what I'm saying? They have
For sure.
so many shellfish.
Oh, speaking of cuisine, that is also sex segregated in Alkar. Men are supposed to have spicy stuff, and women are supposed to have sweet stuff.
Which just, like, I know it's not necessarily supposed to make sense, but that one just, like, throws me for a loop.
It's weird. I don't get it.
But it's like, at the same time, it's like, since everything is sex segregated in Alkar, basically, might as well just make the food that way, too. Because why the fuck not?
To be fair, though, a lot of the sexist bullshit in our world is also stupid.
Yeah, no, that's the thing.
No, it's arbitrary as fuck.
Yeah.
I think it's Sanderson's point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's like definitely the point of it's definitely what he's going for there. It's like, yeah, all this sex segregation stuff is really just arbitrary bullshit. And it doesn't really have a direct bearing on it should not really be as it is.
It shouldn't be as big of a deal as it is. Like, for example, the safe hand.
Oh, yeah.
No. Oh, yeah, we'll get to that in a minute when we get to Shallan's chapters.
Yeah.
But, yeah, the basic idea is they treat the crab donkeys better than they treat the slaves. Which, you know...
They also treat the slaves better than they treat the slaves.
Mm-hmm.
Like normal human beings can be made slaves.
Oh, okay, right. And then there's the
Parshmen. Slaves in this setting. The Parshmen are a different species than humans, and they're more like
they're more chattel slaves.
Yeah, they also how to describe them?
They're basically humanoid. They're humanoid, but instead of normal skin like we have, they have skin that has marbled patterns of like red and black and white. And they're human-esque, but they're not human.
Correct. Yeah. But yeah, they are treated
because they're expensive.
They also are basically treated as if they have an intelligence equivalent to like a really smart dog or a really dumb chimpanzee. Is how they're treated basically.
Mm-hmm.
When there are signs that they are as intelligent as humans on average.
Mm-hmm.
The Alethi are fighting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, we'll point out here that Kaladin, as a slave, there are two ways that you can be branded a slave. The first is to be tattooed, where they basically have the slave brand tattooed into your skin. The second way is through a branding iron. And Kaladin has 3 brands on his forehead, including the brand Shesh, which means dangerous.
Yeah, specifically because he has attempted to escape, 7, 8 times in the past?
10.
10. Mm.
10. That number again, huh?
Oh, yeah. Huh.
10 times in 8 months.
Yeah, you're going to see that number 10 pop up a lot.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost like it's an art number.
Yeah. Weird how that works, right? But we should probably keep going because we've been spending a lot of time in the early bits.
So much in this book. There's so much.
This is a very dense book.
Perhaps it would be good to have one person cover each major character arc.
Yeah.
Dibs on Kaladin.
Dalinar.
Shallan.
I'll get the interludes.
Oh, so you get steps too. Nice.
You're also stuck with Adolin.
Adolin.
Is that how you
Is it
pronounce
Adolin?
It's Adolin.
Adolin.
Adolin, Renarin, and Kaladin.
Huh.
Okay, so I got the other two right, just not Adolin. And I don't know how Gen feels about Adolin, Fuzzy, but I don't think it's as derisive as you do.
Oh, I'm finally not alone in my hatred of that particular character. But we'll have words. Believe you me, we will have words when we get to that. But that's not until like book 2 or 3.
All right. Well, anyways, so I'll just talk about Kaladin's arc then, because he like we've said before, he goes through a lot in this. But so basically, after this slave wagon, he starts to slowly form a bond with the Spren Sill. While at the same time, he is sold off to one of the Alethi High Princes as a slave to carry a bridge across the Shattered Plains. So basically, the Shattered Plains are a whole bunch of rocky plateaus that have huge gaps between them. And in order to cross them at all, the High Princes bring a shitload of slaves carrying bridges with them and laying them out to cross each gap. And the slaves are treated absolutely terribly. But while they're out, they are basically just... And it's not even for, like... For the most part, it's not even for war expeditions. It's just straight up, they're hunting for monsters to collect gems and stuff to make themselves richer.
So a little bit of background, I believe, is necessary here, if you don't mind, Jack.
Go for it.
So the people that the Alethi are ostensibly at war with are the Parshendi, who are like those Parshmen, but they have like full control of them, their mental faculties, and they also have a number of different forms. But the reason they're at war is that they were discovered, there was a sort of peace treaty going on, and then on the night of the feast commemorating this peace treaty, they had Seth...
They hired Seth to kill the Alethi king.
So that kind of threw diplomatic negotiations out the water. But the reason that
Straight into the shitter. Straight into the shitter.
Yep. And the reason they're fighting so hard for the Shattered Plains is because they're home to these creatures called chasm fiends. And aside from the delicious, delicious crab meat that these chasm fiends possess, which, you know, crab meat is one of the primary reasons for war across the multiverse. Aside from that, a slight minor side benefit is that they have giant gems for hearts. So emeralds primarily.
Remember how we said at the beginning that gems can hold Stormlight? Yeah, you're going to see that pop up a lot.
Yeah, so big gems hold much Stormlight, and they can also be used by soulcasters, which are essentially ancient machines that are alchemists. That give you alchemical powers, and so gems of specific types can be transformed into things like food.
Emeralds can be turned into food, smokestone into smoke, rubies into blood, etc., etc.
Which is a plot point in Shallan's storyline, but yes, go on, Jack.
Anyways, so Kaladin gets sold into the service of probably the worst of the High Princes. There are 10. That number pops up again. Alethi High Princes, and the one Kaladin is forced into servitude under is Sadius. And his treatment of his slaves is particularly bad because he's just like, he basically works them to death, and he's extremely callous in his treatment of the bridge carriers in general.
So but apparently, sorry for talking over you, Jack. Apparently, the reason he does that, he's so callous, is because it's cheaper to buy fresh slaves than it is to keep older slaves alive.
Yeah, that sounds like Sadius. He's kind of a colossal dick.
I think Whitney makes a joke like that once.
Yep, he does. We'll talk about Wit later.
I love Wit. Fucking best character.
It's fucking amazing. Anyways, Kaladin is assigned to Bridge 4, where he at first works under an asshole boss who is demanding. Oh, hey, relatable stuff. Again. Anyways, he starts to at one point he eventually comes to his actual lowest point, where he is standing over the edge of one of the chasms and thinking about jumping in and ending it all. And fortunately Syl talks him out of it, and he goes back to the camp, and he eventually starts bonding with the other members of Bridge 4. And they start taking care of each other and learning more about each other and developing an actual kinship. They start sharing food around a fire. They start singing songs with each other, sharing each other's stories, and just forging a bond of brotherhood amongst one another as the story goes on. Unfortunately, at one point, Kaladin inadvertently pisses off his superiors and strung out in a high storm to die.
Yeah, he has a talent for that.
In a very angry hurricane.
Yeah. So all he's left with is the clothes on his back and a single gemstone in his hand that he hid. And he somehow miraculously survives the high storm, which no one believed he could possibly do, and which by all means should have not happened.
He also had some sort of magical vision during the high storm, but that's, like, totally not going to be important.
Also, I'm going to say that was a really, really cool scene.
It was.
It was, especially... also, apparently, when they find him the next morning, it looks like he's been flayed, and he does look like a corpse. In fact, they call it his corpse until he opens his eyes.
And takes a deep breath.
After this, they dubbed him After that, they dubbed him Kaladin Stormblessed because he fucking survived a high storm.
Well, to be fair, no, weren't they calling him Stormblessed like from his military days?
Yeah, I mean,
it's a name that's followed him around repeatedly.
Followed him around, but he like earns it at this point, and people like stop calling him that sarcastically and start calling him that like.
I mean, they called him that seriously back when he was in the army too.
Yeah, no. I think some of his superiors called him that sarcastically up until the high storm incident, between him being enslaved and the high storm.
I think the name was Princeling or Lordling.
Yes.
Yeah. Gaz called him Lordling.
Right. So did Moash.
Gaz and Moash.
Yes, we will have words about Moash later.
Let's not go down that road just yet.
Let's worry about that later.
That's next book.
Anyways.
That's the next book, and the book after that, and the book after that, even when you wish it wasn't.
Oh, God. Anyways. So, yeah, people start actually treating him with a degree of respect and awe after this, and things are finally starting to look up for him. And at one point, he decides he wants to increase the survival chances for the bridgemen in the skirmishes against the Parshendi, who regularly target the bridgemen with arrows to prevent them from crossing the chasms and to debilitate the army. So Kaladin comes up with the ingenious tactic to use the damn bridges as shields while they charge the enemy.
That's what.
And it fucking works.
But it also gets him strung up because we learn here that the reason the bridgemen are sent out is to act as live bait. They literally are there to draw fire from the enemy.
Yeah. Bridgemen aren't supposed to survive.
Yeah, no. It's at this point that you realize how fucking callous and awful most of the Alethi nobility are. And, well, it was already pretty clear before that, but, like, it's really clear at this point. And I believe this is also when we start getting Kaladin's flashbacks. Or am I mixing up the order a bit?
You're mixing up the order a bit, but
it's fine. It's not like we're sticking to a strict order anyway.
Yeah. At what point do we start getting Kaladin's flashbacks? I forget. It's been a while. I think
they start pretty early in the book.
Yeah, I think they start in Act 2. So basically, Kaladin, as a young man, as a child, he was trained by his father to become
Chapter 10. Chapter 10 in Part 1.
Oh, yeah. So very early on. Anyways, Kaladin is trained by his father as a surgeon. And his younger brother, Tien, is also... he regularly plays with his younger brother Tien and also with the local lord's daughter, Laral.
Also, I'm just trying very hard. I have to force myself to avoid making a Dragon Ball Z joke every time Tien's name is brought up.
It's the hardest.
Anyways, so things are going fine for him in his youth until
he hits puberty.
Yeah, things began going to crap. And one of those things that happens is that we get a new lord in town by the name of Roshone.
Well, it's after Laral's father. So basically, what Cal's dad Liren was trying to set up is that he had a very good relationship with Laral's father, City Lord Wistio. And I believe that's his name. And they were basically setting it up so that because they were fairly low Dan and he was fairly high Nan, that basically trying to set Cal and Laral up to be married in the future. And Wistio was amenable to that, and then he died horribly.
Yeah. So now Roshone moves in, and he is a colossal dick, but he cares deeply about his son, which makes things all the worse when said son dies in a hunting accident, and he blames Liren for not being able to save said son.
Liren is a surgeon.
Liren is the surgeon and Cal's father. So he starts taking it out on Liren, and eventually he sends Tien off to war, even though he's technically too young to be recruited into the army. So Kaladin volunteers to go to war with Tien in order to protect him, but eventually fails and Tien dies in front of him. While Kaladin is completely helpless to do anything about it.
And this was...
But wait, it gets better.
3 or 4 years before the start of the book that happened.
Yeah, it gets better because Kaladin continues to fight on even after that and distinguishes himself incredibly. Eventually, I don't think we explained Shardplate and Shardbearers.
I think we'll get to that with Dalinar.
Well, no, because it's necessary for Kaladin's flashback too to explain it.
Yeah.
So, Fuzzy, do you want to talk about Shardbearers?
So the thing about Shardbearers, one of the main things is that Surgebinders, the wizards of the world, were collectively known as the Knights Radiant, depending on their order. And a few hundred years ago, there was an event called the Recreance, in which the Knights Radiant apparently abandoned humanity and were demonized as the Lost Radiants. The only thing that remains of them is shard blades and shard plate. Shard plate is essentially gem-powered super armor.
Power armor.
It's power armor, powered by precious jewels. And it gives you super strength.
Stormlight.
Yes, it uses Stormlight, but in the form of gems. So it's self-repairing. It gives you super strength, and durability, speed, jumping power, basically all of that fun stuff. And shard blades are just truly humongous anime swords, which are capable of being bonded to a user so that they can be dismissed to mist and then summoned in solid form by the user after 10 beats of their heart have passed. And they can cut through anything.
That number again.
Mm-hmm. And they can cut through anything.
They're basically lightsabers on steroids.
Yes, and when they cut through flesh, it doesn't actually harm the flesh, but it does harm the soul. So when you get killed by a shard blade, it leaves your eyes burned out of your skull.
And if you get your arm or leg cut with the shard blade, it means you lose all sensation to that part of your body.
It basically becomes dead, yeah.
But the limb does not get removed.
Yeah.
So you just have this arm flopping uselessly at your side.
So it's basically George Lucas's nightmare because no one can actually get their arms cut off.
Yep.
And really, and the thing about it is, eventually, as you use Shardblade and Shardplate, it can even make dark eyes into light eyes. Like, it literally changes the color of your eyes as you bond them. And
it's unknown if that happens in the first one.
It does.
Yeah.
It's stated to happen.
What we do know is that that is very rare to happen and only happens if a Dark Eyes manages to kill a Shardbearer in the battle and claims their armor.
Which, considering the fact that it's usually a poorly trained dude with a spear against
a sci-fi medieval knight with power armor and a magic sword that can cut through anything.
Yeah, it generally doesn't end well until Kaladin stabs a Shardbearer in the eye.
Yeah.
Always seal your eye slits, kids.
Yeah, so Kaladin manages to punch well above his weight class and kills a Shardbearer. But his highest superior on the field, and he saves his superior, Bright Lord Amaram, in the process. So Amaram's like, dude, you killed the Shardbearer. You can take his armor and his sword, and Kaladin's like, no, I don't want to do that, actually. And Amaram's like, okay, and kills all the survivors of his squad and has Kaladin sold into slavery, so he can claim the stuff.
Real nice guy, though.
What?
Yeah, no, fuck Amaram. But yeah, I'm gonna leave off on Kaladin's story here for now, so that one of you guys can talk about the next.
Shallan.
I love Shallan. Shallan's my girl.
Shallan's great.
Hey, I have not finished it yet.
Okay.
Stop it.
Yep, okay.
Stop.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
God, make us get the spray bottle, Fuzzy.
We will catch up in due time. Don't worry.
So Shallan is, she's probably, I think, honestly, at least for the first 3 books, I still like her in book 4 so far, but I know that she has some issues as far as Fuzzy's concerned. That's okay. But in the first 3 books, I feel like she is one of the most interesting characters in, like, all of fiction. Like, we are talking, this character is my all-time favorite character. Number 1 slot. But she starts off, she's basically a Rosharan equivalent of a 16-year-old girl, out on her own, and is just, when we meet her, she is just getting off of a ship in a city called Kharbranth, which is quite a ways away from where Kaladin is having his arc at. And she is there to meet with the princess of Alethkar and hopefully become her ward. And through a pretty long process of that day, she meets with the princess, fails to convince Yasna to let her be her ward, gets okay to try to repetition Yasna, decides to go buy books in order to try to cram as much information as she can so that she can impress Yasna one last time, and ends up becoming Yasna's ward out of sheer tenacity. And then we learn...
I fucking love Yasna.
I love Yasna.
Yasna's great.
I still pronounce her name wrong in my head.
Oh, I pronounce her Jasna all the time.
I mean, so does Sanderson. Sanderson fucks it up all the time.
Yeah, so I feel better about it if the author can't get it right.
Yeah, it's supposed to be pronounced Yasna, but spelled Jasna.
I feel like he should have. I feel like he got too fancy with the spelling there. I feel like at that point you should have just. It's a fictional language. You should have just like.
Well, there is real world situations where J's are pronounced as Y's.
Yeah, but like he could have just averted that for his fictional language.
Once you get an idea in your head, it's really hard to get rid of it.
To be fair, he also has. To be fair, Kaladin is also supposed to be pronounced Kaladin, and no one does that.
No one pronounces it like that.
To the point that he makes a joke about it in the next book.
Kaladin.
I still imagine Rock as Russian. I don't know why. I still can't.
He's Hawaiian, though.
He's supposed to be Hawaiian.
I know he's Hawaiian, but I can't. But the.
Are you mixing him up with Sonya for some reason?
No. Because the way his syntax works, it just fits very well with Russian accent.
It's Tongan or Samoan. That's what it is. It's inspired by the Polynesian Isles.
That makes sense, yeah.
So what you're saying is we should put Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in a red wig and have him play Rock. Yes. I mean, it fits. They're both.
Hell yeah!
Have The Rock play Rock. It writes itself.
I would fucking love that. That'd be great.
That would fit really well. It's just trying to get The Rock to have the facial hair and everything.
That'd be perfect.
It's the chops, really. You just gotta get the button chops.
If The Rock was willing to go through the Scorpion Kingification process, he'll put on a wig and fake beard.
That's true. Anyway, back to Shallan.
Who is also a redhead. I love Shallan.
They're cousins. Okay.
Yeah, apparently the red hair comes from the Horn-Eater, distant Horn-Eater DNA relation.
Genetics in Roshar is wild. I love it.
And apparently the Horn-Eaters get their DNA from interbreeding with the Parshendi.
Yeah. So do the Herdazians, by the way.
Yeah, about the hair color. Apparently people can get mix and match hair colors. So Dalinar's sons both have a mix of brunette and blonde hair.
It's black.
Black hair. Black.
Yeah, black and blonde hair mixed together. So it's kind of fun.
Mm-hmm. Shallan, however, doesn't have a single lock of proper black. In fact, she makes that note explicitly in her opening chapters, that her hair is very red and not even a lock of proper black. But she becomes Yasna's ward, and when she becomes Yasna's ward, we discover that her real purpose of becoming Yasna's ward is not to become a scholar and to learn and get all the benefits of being a ward to a princess. No, her goal is to steal Yasna's soulcaster. And that sends us into a big, long arc where Shallan basically tries to get close to Yasna, tries to, while trying to, masquerade as this woman's ward and learn from her, she's also trying to figure out how Yasna stores her soulcaster and, find an opportunity to steal it and then escape Kharbranth so that she can go home and use it to make money for her impoverished family that is on the brink of falling into some pretty bad situations after their father died. And Yasna does, her duty is teaching Shallan about philosophy and history and all of these different things, culminating in I think, rather controversial lesson where she takes Shallan out into the streets at night to a place that is known to be targeted by thieves and murderers and rapists, and all to teach Shallan a philosophy lesson where she exposes her wealth and invites being attacked by these ruffians. And then Yasna pretty handily murders them.
Oh yeah, no, they get insta killed basically.
So yeah, it's pretty horrifying actually, and this action horrifies Shallan so much that she decides that she's going to steal Yasna's soulcaster and screw the woman's morality that she'd been coming to actually really like and was feeling really guilty about having to steal from. So. And that's a pretty good stopping place for her if we want to move on to Dalinar.
So Dalinar is an interesting character because we meet him at a point where the character we meet and the character people expect him to be are very different people. So Dalinar is a classic grizzled old soldier who has become a general, right? His whole thing is that he very strictly wishes to follow old, idealized Alethi codes of war, and he follows them strictly and enforces it upon his own soldiers because he has become fed up with the Alethi culture entirely, more or less, with the fact that they're constantly squabbling for power, constantly bickering amongst each other, and constantly, throwing lives away for no good reason. And he wants that to change, because that's what he believes his brother wanted, because he is the brother of the former king, the first person in, centuries to unite the Alethi.
This is Alexander the Great. The first person since Alexander the Great.
Well, yes, their equivalent of Alexander the Great or Genghis Khan. I would say Genghis Khan is probably more appropriate. Considering...
Well, that's Dalinar.
No.
Dalinar is Genghis Khan, according to Sando.
Oh, okay, never mind then.
That makes sense. That tracks.
Yeah, so that should give you an idea of what he was in the past.
And Sadie's the Sunmaker is supposed to be Alexander the Great because he died at 23.
Fair enough. So, the thing is, everyone knows Dalinar as the Blackthorn, a real Genghis Khan type who just murdered his way through oceans of blood and flesh, and they're all terrified of him, and they don't believe that he's had such a major change. And the added wrinkle to all this is that every time there's a high storm, Dalinar outwardly seems to become incoherent, but what happens inwardly is that he ends up entering a vision in which he takes the perspective of some individual in the distant past and is shown events that he should have no way of knowing about, and of course everyone is convinced that he's just gone senile or mad from the stress of his past exploits, whereas he sincerely believes that these are messages from the Almighty. Well, to a certain extent. That comes as it goes along, and basically it's as he's trying to balance the Alethi need for conquest and his own baser impulses with this ideal, hint hint, wink wink, nudge nudge, of what he believes people should be. And I forget where it exactly comes to a head, but he essentially spends the first part... well, his introduction trying to secure an alliance and trying to secure common ground between high princes while being derided every step of the way, including by his own son, Adolin, who believes his father is going mad and is the perfect Alethi princeling, which is not a compliment.
If you couldn't tell, Fuzzy loves Adolin.
Oh yeah, just favorite character. He's just a great guy. Just love him.
Love him to death.
Great hair though.
Adolin Nalzium.
Don't remind me. So yeah, Dalinar. Does anyone want to remind me where his he ends off in part 1?
I think so fucking long.
I think he ends off with abdication. His decision.
Right. He makes the declaration that he wants to give up his seat as High Prince to his son, who, for completely selfless reasons, is all like, hey, I wanted you to be serious, but I didn't want you to, like, do that. I don't want the responsibility. Which is, in a completely non-selfish reason, says that he shouldn't be made High Prince. It's not...
Well, we don't get Dalinar until part 2.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying at the end of Dalinar's introductory part.
Yes.
I believe we also meet Wit at this point.
Yep. Oh god, I fucking love Wit.
I have complicated feelings on Hoid. So Hoid, Wit is Wit, but Wit is actually Hoid, who is an ancient, mysterious being of great power who has shown up in cameos in every single Sanderson book thus far, but is explicitly a major player starting in the Stormlight archives. And he is the King's Wit, which is essentially a court jester with a very interesting flavor in that his job is to insult all of the other high princes. And it is perfectly legal for the high princes at any point to just murder the King's Wit out of hand, but any high prince who does so is divested of their land and titles and status. So yeah, it's basically a game where he sees how far he can push it, and the high princes see how much they can tolerate before they snap and decide that shutting him up is worth losing everything.
It's at this point, it's a game. If he kills me, I win.
It's very much that, yes.
Sorry, I had to bridge.
Yes, of course.
It felt right.
Yes, no, that's just the correct thing to do. But yeah, so that's Wit, and that's Dalinar, and we move on to some very interesting characters in the interludes.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So the interludes are all characters who are either unimportant side characters or characters that have great relevance to either the larger narrative of the archive or the larger narrative of the cosmere at large. So, like, in the first set of interludes, we get Ishik, Nambalat, which is Shallan's brother, and Szeth. In the Way of Kings, all of the interlude chapters, there are 3, they all end with a Szeth chapter. Ishik, for interlude 1, is a fisherman from the Pure Lake region who is just minding his own business. We learn a little bit about the Pure Lakers and what their whole belief system is and their whole deal. And he just sees a bunch of foreigners who just appear out of fucking nowhere and are actually, for people who've read most of the Cosmere books, will recognize them from other stories. You get Demo from Scatriel, from the Mistborn series, Galadon from Sal from the Elantris book, and a character named Bayon from Taladin, which is from the White Sand comics. And they're a group of characters who are looking for Hoid. Balat is just more context for the Shallan story. And then we get the Szeth story, which is kind of just like, what has Szeth been up to since he killed a king? and we get a little bit of get a greater sense of who Zeth is, what his belief system is, and also why he is where he is, which is he has been made what's called truthless by the elders of his people for saying something that is untrue, and has been cursed or, well, punished to be a warrior slave. And whoever holds what's called the Oath Stone can command Zeth to do anything they want except two things. First, kill himself, and second, give up the blade. Give up his honor blade.
Well, his shard blade, we don't exactly know what an honor blade is yet at that point.
Yeah, but, and so there is, for the first story, we get Zeth kind of having to do menial tasks and be the servant of minor people, small people. And just kind of like his whole rationale, which is, I will do as my master commands. I will do as my master commands. I will do as my master. You get the sense that he is a very lawful, neutral type character. Later, the other interludes follow characters like Risen, who is I fucking love, who is another character who is more present for the story of world building and initially world building. She comes from the trading kingdom of Thalena, and we first see her going to Shinovar, Zeth's homeland, to do a trade, and you just get more context for the world and kind of just how things are outside of the Alethi focused story.
So just a side note that Thalena kind of neatly ties into is that for the most part, ethnicity is very specialized for a lot of peoples, in the sense that they vaguely tend to look like the Alethi people and most of their neighbors look vaguely South Asian with pronounced epicanthic folds. Mm-hmm. And most of them seem to have some variation of that. The Shin people from Shinovar are notably the only people with what we would describe as Caucasian ethnicities. And they're constantly described as having wide, childlike eyes because they don't have pronounced epicanthic folds. And otherwise, ethnicity takes form in some very unique ways. For example, Herdazians have finger and toenails made of crystal instead of chitin. And
Horn-eaters have teeth in their throats.
And the entire Thalen thing is that they have wacky eyebrows. That's their thing. They have very, very long eyebrows that grow well past their brow ridge and are basically just frame their face.
And they're always white.
Oh, and yes, and their eyebrows are always white regardless of any other hair color.
And that's kind of like Risen. You also get Axes the Collector, who is a very interesting character who I would love to hear more about, honestly. We don't get anything about him. I really want to see more of
him, but he kind of just shows up in one interlude, and that's it.
Well, he shows up again he shows up in two.
Well, one viewpoint interlude.
Yes, but he shows up in Risen's second interlude.
Mm-hmm.
And Axes the Collector is a character who is he's there to collect spren. He just wants to he wants to catalog all the spren in the world. So we get a lot of world building from him. We get another Zeth interlude, which has him again in the ownership of another person. But it ends, the second Zeth interlude ends with him gaining a new owner who wants to put him to good use. And the idea of Zeth is a character who doesn't like to kill, but feels he's forced to. And one of the other big arcs or themes of the Stormlight Archive is taking responsibility for your actions and kind of owning it in a way, right? Like, and one of Zeth's things in this book especially is he passes the blame onto his masters, onto people who hold his oath stone. He's not to blame for killing Gavilar. He's not to blame for all the people he kills. It's the person who holds his stone. And so, like, we get a lot of that from Zeth's interlude. And then the final 3 interludes are Baxil, Garanid, and the final Zeth interlude. Baxil is just a random character, but he's in the service of someone who's very important. A character mentioned in the prelude, so to speak. But we don't really know that just yet. And we also get our one of our earliest mentions of the old magic and the Night Watcher, which is another magic system on Roshar. And then finally, we have Garanid and Asher, who are scholars ardent, who spend their time studying spread, and Asher, who does culinary gastronomy is the word, I think.
Something like that.
And we find out that Spren follow Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which is very cool.
And they follow they follow basic quantum wave function collapse rules. Like certain Spren, like in the example, it's flame Spren. They are constantly flickering until you measure them and write down a measurement, at which point they lock into that position.
Mm-hmm. And then we end the interludes between part 3 and part 4 with Zeth doing his work, which is killing kings. We find him killing King Hanavanar of Yakaved. And again, we get this idea that Zeth is passing blame from himself onto others. He's running away from the consequences of his actions because he blames the fact that he's killing all these people at a feast, which is when he goes to assassinate King Hanavanar. He blames the people that he kills on the king because the king decided to hold a feast knowing Zeth would come for him. And then we end with Zeth killing him and flying off into the sunset.
Oh yeah, his magic allows him to fly. Like he has gravitational manipulation and he can stick people to things.
He has magic of adhesion and gravitation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And with that, I believe we're back around to Jack.
Yep. So I looked it up with a copy of the tome, and I actually finished on Kaladin's last part 3 chapter, which was his last flashback chapter. Yeah, his flashback ends with him being sold into slavery by Amaram. Or is it Amaram? I don't fucking know.
Look, they're made up words anyway. Let's just pronounce them.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyways, I actually think that it's best to cover part of Dalinar's arc up until this point because covering Dalinar's part 3 and 4 arc informs a lot of Kaladin's arc in part 4.
Okay. Just
Shallan is kind of separate from everyone else, so it's not as relevant.
It's relevant long term, but it's immediately she has a more self-contained story.
It's very separate from everyone else at this point.
Yes, it is.
So yeah, go ahead and cover the rest of Dalinar.
So what ends up happening is the thing that really one thing is that every book title is based on an in-world book of some sort. And what causes Dalinar to really rethink the Alethi people and their culture is a book called In Universe, The Way of Kings, written by what is essentially the some sort of vague platonic ideal of good, benevolent king, who, and those are the words he lives by, and what ends up happening is that combined with his visions, while it makes him, slowly molds him into a better person, it does also have the unfortunate side effect of putting blood in the water, so to speak. In the sense that the Alethi High Princes smell weakness, and they jump on that. Like,
not all of them, just most of them.
Alethkar as a nation is very focused on competition and war and on
strength and power
strength and doing, being the best at whatever it is you do. And so they don't take things like peace or compassion very well. They see them as weaknesses rather than as good things.
Mm-hmm.
And
a good chunk of Alethi culture is good old proud warrior race posturing.
And another thing that the Alethi all have in common is something called the thrill. That's a proper noun, thrill. And
capital.
The thrill is basically a battle lust that consumes them, and one of the big turning points is that when, for the first time in his memory, Dalinar loses the thrill in the middle of a battle against the Parshendi, which nearly leads to him being quite injured. And what another thing that happens that I forgot to mention is that there's an assassination attempt on the king.
All right, we haven't really talked about the actual king, who would be Alhokar.
Is he though?
Yes. Again, what were you gonna say?
I was just saying, is he the king though? Is he?
Yeah, no, that therein lies the problem. Is that
everyone thinks that Dalinar is much more kingly than Alhokar, which is
I mean, they're
part
right.
They are right.
They're not wrong.
It rubs Alhokar really wrong and gives him a massive inferiority complex that does not help him with his issues.
And basically, there's an assassination attempt on the king, and Dalinar is ostensibly put in charge of investigating this, and what ends up happening is that he goes to Elhokar and suggests that it might be better if he reinstates old official positions in the Alethi command structure, High Prince of X. So he wants Elhokar to make him the High Prince of War, which would essentially make him the person in charge of all.
Commander-in-Chief. He'd be the commander-in-chief.
He'd be the commander-in-chief, yes. And Elhokar just sees that as a power play, because he's a bit of an idiot.
He's also very Alethi.
He's very Alethi, incredibly paranoid.
Correct, but it's mostly incorrect.
Yes. And what ends up happening is that Dalinar reaches out to Sadeas, who was an old friend in the time of Gavilar's reign and conquest, and is now his most bitter political rival.
They used to be war buddies, and they are not buddies anymore.
The war part's still there, it's just the buddy part that's kind of... gone down the drain. And what?
Hey guys, I will be right back. I've got to go get my kids to bed.
Okay. So what ends up happening is that he figures out that not only did not only was there evidence of sabotage in for the assassination attempt, so like it is confirmed that someone did in fact try and kill him. He also has his first high storm vision in front of his men. He's not able to get to a private location first, and that just makes a lot of problems because the rumor mill gets working. And eventually, what ends up happening is that Dalinar is not the best at political maneuvering, and Sadeas is much better, and Sadeas succeeds in convincing Elhokar to make him the High Prince of Information to investigate the assassins, which basically undermines Dalinar's entire position.
Mm-hmm.
After which, things seem to be going wrong and even more wrong until Navani, the widow of his brother, and also something of an old flame, all things considered. Basically, there was a love triangle between him, his brother, and Navani, and she shows up and begins to record what he says during the visions. And as it turns out, he is speaking in a language that does exist and does have translations, but he should have no way of knowing. Which leads them...
Because the language and dead.
Yes, it's a dead language. So it leads them to believe that there is, in fact, something to these visions after all. And eventually, the last vision, he asks the Almighty, who is appearing to him in these visions, if he should trust Sadeas, and is told something that leads him to believe that, yes, he can, in fact, trust Sadeas. So, that leads to the Battle of the Tower, which is going to tie into Kaladin's thing, and is going to tie into the Sanderlanche at the end, which we'll cover collaboratively, because that's kind of Sanderson's thing, is that all of his books end in a massive, frenetic climax that basically is just non-stop action.
Yeah, I've lost time I've lost actual hours during a Sanderlanche.
I tend to just lose hours during the books in general.
Yeah, but specifically the Sanderlanche, you know?
Yes, that part is the biggest part, but yeah, Rhythm of War I started reading and then I finished the book and I realized it was 8 in the morning. The next day.
Man. Jesus. Anyways, do you want to leave off there on
yeah, Battle of the Tower is kind of where Kaladin and Dalinar's plot lines intersect, so you should probably go through.
So I'll just cover both.
Yeah, we'll cover both at the same time, and you cover Kaladin's thing up to the Battle of the Tower.
Okay, so after the whole High Storm incident, most of Part 3 he's recovering, and we get the confirmation that Kaladin is a Nascent Knight Radiant. He just hasn't sworn any oaths yet, so he can only do the barest minimum of the magic. So he starts practicing with it, and eventually one of his comrades in Bridge 4, Teft, who is going to be a bit more important later on in later books, informs him that of what the deal is and of the oaths the Knights Radiant used to swear. And he tells him what the first oath is. And I will read that, the first ideal rather. And I will read that aloud to you right now. So, with the different Knight orders, each ideal is different. There are 5 levels of ideals. And for each order, the second through fifth ideals is different. The first ideal is the same for every order. And it goes life before death, strength before weakness, journey before destination. And Teft explains the meaning behind each of these to Kaladin shortly before they go off to the on the mission with Dalinar and Sadeas.
Well, a lot of stuff happens in the interim, though.
Oh yeah, no, a lot of stuff happens in the interim. Largely, it's things shuffling around with the bridges and Kaladin getting used to the magic and slowly but surely gaining leadership over Bridge 4. During which point Gaz deserts at some point along the line there. I don't remember when he deserted. I think it was like way back in part 2 of this book. It was a while ago. But anyways,
Gaz deserts after the bridge incident.
Oh yes, the bridges that got Kaladin strung up during the high storm.
Yes, that's when Gaz gets essentially he's punished. Like, he was going to be punished. He had a lot of debts, so he gets sent away.
No, so he's skedaddled before he can suffer consequences.
Yes. But yeah, he shows up again in book 2.
But anyways, Kaladin, he undergoes a lot of internal conflict in this section, leading up to the Battle of the Towers. And yeah, let's go back to Dalinar now.
So what ends up happening is that So earlier, it's important to note, it turns out that through one of Kaladin's distraction tactics, the Parshendi take personal offense because they hold the corpses of their people to be sacred, and they don't disturb corpses after they die, right?
And Kaladin decided to strip a Parshendi corpse and use it as armor.
And flaunt it. He doesn't just use it as armor, he flaunts it. He taunts them with it. He basically does the closest you're ever going to get in a non-video game context to being a video game, an MMO tank.
Yeah.
Like
and so just fire a shitload of arrows at him, and some of them fire away from him, and Kaladin uses some of that magic to draw all the remaining arrows directly
No. I'm talking about before that, in which Bridge 4 is resting, and they are sitting ducks for a volley of Parshendi arrows, and Dalinar, in full plate and blade, just crashes into the Parshendi lines to make sure that the bridgemen survive. Like, it's a calculated move on his part, and this is the point where everyone says... Because Kaladin, understandably so, has an extremely deep-seated resentment and hatred of Light Eyes.
Yeah.
Because racism is what he has known his entire life. He has been the victim of racism for his entire life, and he hates Light Eyes.
It's all... Yeah, it really just boils down to, like, all the shit he underwent because of Rashon, because of Amaram, because of Sadeas. All those assholes.
I mean, he is very justified in this anger.
Oh, yeah, absolutely 100% justified. And the thing is, everyone says that, but Dalinar is supposed to be different, and he doesn't buy it, because Amaram was also supposed to be different, and we all know how that turned out.
Amaram turned out to be a backstabbing snake.
Yeah, so this is basically the point where he's like, maybe not, but maybe. And so... it basically culminates in the Battle of the Tower, in which Dalinar leaves his entire way of retreat exposed and entirely in Sadeas' hands, believing that the Almighty has told him he should trust Sadeas, And Sadia stabs him in
the back.
Yeah. And abandons him
Dalinar
on a cliff.
And all of his men to die.
With no bridges. Right? Yeah. So basically they are on an island surrounded by impassable chasms, and the enemy can just jump the gaps because their Parshendi have war form, which is super strong.
They did leg day. Like a lot.
They really focused on leg day. And so what ends up happening is... Let
me do Kaladin's part, because... So Kaladin, so we mentioned that tactic where he puts on the Parshendi armor, and then he just pulls out a draw aggro with his magic and draws all the arrows directly into his shield. And it destroys the shield in the process, but everyone else...
And also his arm. But guess what? No. Stormlight gives you a healing factor.
Yep. Anyways, so I think either right before this or during this, he swears the first ideal. And he gets and he starts just going ham.
No. He swears the second ideal. The first oath of the Windrunner. So the first ideal is common, and the second through fifth are...
I explained this already.
Okay, yes, but he swears the second ideal, which is to protect those who cannot.
He doesn't do that yet.
Stop stealing from me.
No, he doesn't do that yet.
He does. He does it at the tower.
He does it.
We're at the Battle of the Tower.
Okay.
Let me say my thing, Fuzzy. You keep interrupting me. Anyways, so basically, Kaladin sees Sadeas abandoning Dalinar and all his men, and after some contemplation, he's like, "You know what? Fuck Sadeas. I'm going to go save Dalinar. Who's with me?" And he manages to get Bridge 4 to come along and join him in saving Dalinar. So they charge the area with the bridge, and Kaladin starts going crazy with his Stormlight, and carves a path forward that lets them get the bridge in. And during this point, he swears the second ideal, which for the Kaladin's order, the Windrunners, is, "I will protect those who cannot protect themselves." And while this is going on, Dalinar is 1v1ing a shard plate owner on the amongst the Parshendi, who is basically like the big boss of the Parshendi war front. And Kaladin jumps in and saves Dalinar's life, and also winds up basically taking command of the entire force and ordering a strategic retreat, which gets Adolin a little bit like, "Wait, what the fuck? Who are you? What gives you where did you get the rank to order this shit?" And it's like, "I'm magic and I have a fucking spear. GTFO. Or you're gonna die here," basically. And he basically single-handedly turns the tide of the battle, allowing Dalinar and his men to make an orderly retreat. And you can go ahead and pick it up from here, Fuzzy.
So what ends up happening is that Dalinar sees some hope that it might be possible to treat with the Parshendi, because the Shardbearer does seem to want to talk, but he's kind of in the middle of, trying to avoid having his people massacred. And what ends up happening is that he succeeds in escaping with Bridge 4, and basically assures Kaladin that he will take responsibility for Bridge 4 and free them if at all possible. And they return to Sadeas' war camp to do the thing. And
by the way, at this point, everyone thinks Dalinar and all of his army is dead because Sadeas told them so.
Yeah, and he returns to the war camp and is like, "Yeah, so we're not dead, and you left us high and dry." And eventually he just well, first things first is among this conversation is kind of a joint thing between Kaladin and Dalinar, in which Kaladin is just expecting the betrayal, even though Dalinar made an oath that he would free Cal and his men. And an important thing to note about Sadeas is that he does not have a full set. He's not a full shard bearer. He only has shard plate. He does not have a blade. And the reason this comes into play is that Sadeas, just to spite Dalinar, who offers an absurd, like, overpaying for all of his bridgemen, slaves. This is the point where Sadeas says no. Kaladin is like, well, that's it. He's gonna stop trying. And Dalinar just pulls out his shard blade, Oathbringer, and decides to trade that for the bridgemen. And Sadeas is more greedy and power hungry than he is spiteful, so he takes the deal. Worst deal he ever made, by the way. Like,
at least one of my favorite exchanges in the series.
It is, but it's probably one of the worst trade deals in the history of Rosharan trade deals.
To be fair,
let me just say, like, this leads to one of my favorite exchanges in the series, which is Kaladin's like, "Why did you do this?" And Dalinar says, "What is a man's life worth?" Kaladin responds, "The slave masters say it's worth 2 emerald bro." And what do you say? A life is priceless. Coincidentally, that is the exact value of a shard blade. So today, you and your men sacrificed to buy me 2,600 precious lives. And all I had to repay you with was a single priceless sword. I call that a bargain. Just quality writing.
Excellent quote. That's an excellent quote. And also,
that's
later
just Dalinar's whole bit.
It's one of my favorite bits of dialogue in the series. It's really good.
And
Dalinar has some great quotes.
Dalinar really does.
Look, we'll get to great Dalinar quotes in Oathbringer.
Oh, God.
Oh, makes me weep.
Yeah, no, Oathbringer is going to be that's still one of the best climaxes in the series.
We might have to make that one an extended episode.
Yeah,
because that one's...
basically, additionally, he realizes that Elhokar fabricated his own assassination attempt. The real assassin was the king the whole time. And basically marches into his tent because all of Elhokar's royal guards are men loyal to Dalinar. Beats the crap out of him in his shard blade, without a shard blade or shard plate, and basically has a "look at me, I am the captain now" moment, and also just as an aside, just casually tells Elhokar that he is intending to pursue relations with his mother, which, you know, just really a bit of a low blow. But it kind of reinforces the fact that, yeah, no one's fooled.
Oh, I almost forgot something about with Kaladin's storyline. We find out that Syl is not an ordinary windspren. She's an honor spren, which is a very big deal, and it means that basically Kaladin is bonded with a spren who is capable of assisting him into becoming a Knight Radiant. And that's why he's getting the magic powers, because of Syl.
And
so yeah, that's a major plot point that I totally forgot to bring up.
And that basically wraps up Dalinar and Kaladin's storylines. And now, to wrap up Shallan's storyline.
Oh, one more thing. I believe Dalinar also makes bridge for his bodyguards.
Really more the next one.
Right.
Okay. So, are we ready for Shallan now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, before I get started, that quote from Dalinar at the very end with Elhokar is, "And by the way, your mother and I are now courting. I suggest you get used to that idea."
fucking love Dalinar.
Dalinar could just be so savage without even intending to be. Great.
God, what a fucking boss. Can I call him daddy?
Look, we don't kink shame here.
That's for a later episode.
So, back to Shallan. When I stopped talking about her, I had talked about how Yasna had basically taken her out for a philosophy in action lesson. And when we pick up Shallan back up, I might be screwing up the timeline a little bit because I don't have the book in front of me. But basically, Shallan has successfully stolen the Soulcaster and is trying to find a way to what's the word? She's trying to find a way to escape the situation without incriminating herself. And she's going about her normal duties, but of course the paranoia and worry about being discovered is eating her alive. And she the entire time she's been here as Yasna's ward, she's been meeting with this Ardent named Capsule. Now the Ardents are the religious clergy of the Vorin theology. But the thing about Ardents is the Ardents are basically property. Vorin theology does not allow clergy to have their own status or possessions because of an event in the past where the clergy had basically tried to usurp power and control the world. Kind of like the Roman Catholic Church historically in our world. As a result, the determination was that the clergy would all be possessions of the leaders of the wherever they were at. And so Shallan has been getting really friendly with this Ardent named Capsule, and they've been having regular meetings where he brings her bread and jam, and they discuss some kind of topic. This all comes to a head when Shallan, at the request of King Taravangian, the king of Kharbranth, does a sketch of Taravangian for his niece. Now, we should note here that Shallan is a phenomenal artist. One of the many reasons why I love her and feel such a kinship to her, because artistry in a character is not something that you see very often in fantasy. And as an artist myself, it was one of the things that made me fall in love with her very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's almost a super naturally talented artist.
She is.
She is mentioned to be one of the best artists in the setting.
Yes, absolutely so. And so she's doing this. She has this ability where she can take what she calls a memory of something. And in doing so, she can recall in picture-perfect detail that the scene that she took a memory of and render it in charcoal. And so she's doing this for Taravangian, where she's taking a memory of him and making this really well done sketch of him so that he can give it as a gift to his granddaughter. And as she's doing she lets her mind wander a little bit, and she discovers that she's drawn something in the doorway that she doesn't quite know what it is. But it looks like a creature that kind of human-esque, but without a proper head. It's got, instead of a normal head, it's got this shifting pattern of lines with indescribable geometry. And that freaks her out, of course. So she does the natural artist reaction of ripping out the paper and crumpling it up and telling him that she will make another image later. Life goes on. She has another meeting with Capsule. Capsule's like, "Hey, by the way, you're this really good artist, and you haven't done anything for me yet. Could I have a render of you and me together?" And Shallan has been sort of falling for this Ardent over time. She's like, "Oh, of course." And so she takes a memory of him and starts working herself into the scene that she's drawing. And her mind starts to wander, and she sees another one of these creatures, and it freaks her out. When I say she sees these creatures, she's not seeing them in the real world. She's drawing them as she's working, but she's not seeing them. She's just drawing them, and she doesn't know why. And it freaks her out, and she panics and she runs. She leaves Capsule and starts running. And as she's doing this, as she's running away, she is drawing the scenes that she's seeing. And each time she draws another picture, she sees more of these creatures coming toward her. And so she runs back to her rooms that she shares with Yasna, and continuing to draw, continuing to see these creatures coming for her. And she gets into her room, she shuts and she locks the door, she climbs up onto her bed, and she takes another memory and draws, and she sees the room surrounded with these creatures, and one is reaching across her bed toward her, and then she hears, "What are you?" Flips her out. She goes, she panics, she freaks out, and she basically falls into a place made entirely of glass beads. And right before that, she says her what's called in her order truths. She says a truth that is, "What am I? I'm terrified." And at that point, she falls into this world that becomes a sea of these tiny little glass beads, these glass balls. And she's trying to figure out what's going on, and she finds this one that speaks to her, and she says, she talks to it, she tries to figure out what's going on, and it says, "For so long I've existed, but I will change." And it changes, and she is back in her room, and the goblet that was sitting next to her bed has turned into blood. And in a moment of clarity, she decides, this would be a great way for me to get out of my current situation. I'm going to pretend I tried to commit suicide by cutting my arm with this glass and making it look like all this blood came out of my arm. At which point, Yasna comes in and shouts, for help, and picks Shallan up, and they time passes, and Shallan's in the infirmary and is getting ready to leave. Her ship that she came in on has been called and is going to take her home. And as a last thing, she's using the excuse that she's stressed and worried about her family and is going to go home. And as a last, goodbye, Capsule comes in to greet her and Shallan and see them to greet her and Yasna and see Shallan off. And Capsule during this entire time has, asked Shallan a lot of questions about Yasna. Clearly is trying to find a way to convert Yasna, who is an acclaimed heretic and denier of the Vorin theology. And so, to humor Shallan, who Yasna thinks she is driven to near suicide, Yasna decides that she's going to allow this Ardent to be there, and she's going to talk to him and, be civil. And Capsule brings bread and jam, like he's done all the time. And he gives Shallan some bread and Yasna some bread and spreads the jam on it. And Yasna, thinking that, Yasna goes to eat the bread and everything. And, when he says, "Oh, you should try this jam, Yasna grabs the jar and she goes, well, hold up a second. This isn't this. I don't know what strawberries are supposed to smell like, but is it supposed to smell this bad? And so Capsule takes the jar back and he smells it, and he does something really inexplicable. He tries to put it on his bread and choke it down, and he tells Shallan, insistently, you need to try this jam. And Shallan, of course, refuses because she thinks it's gone bad. And Capsule jumps up and he starts running away. And before he can even get a few steps away, he falls over and dies. Shortly after that, Shallan also starts feeling very, very ill and, falls to the ground, basically spasming. And Yasna goes on and tells her that, she's going to soul cast the poison out of her blood. And Shallan goes, well, you probably are going to want to get your soul caster out of my safe pouch. And which is basically a little pocket inside a Vorin woman's safe hand sleeve, because Vorins have this proprietary modesty idea that women all have their left hands are all called safe hands and aren't supposed to be seen. So Yasna gets the soulcaster out of Shallan's safe pouch and soulcasts the poison out of Shallan's blood, and that's when the story cuts back to Dalinar and Adolin, which they've already gone over. When we finally come back to them, Shallan has been found out, obviously, because she revealed that she stole the soulcaster, and basically is in the doghouse and is going to be, in a lot of trouble and, basically an outcast in all of high society because of what she tried to pull over on Yasna. And Shallan puts two and two together and she realizes, well, hang on a second. Yasna soulcasted the bread. She realizes this when she's drawing, and she finds that Yasna's bread that she's eating in the scene with Capsule is drooping in a very unbread-like way. And she realizes, hang on a second, she's soulcasting, but she couldn't have soulcasted because she didn't have her soulcaster. How is she doing that? And she goes to Yasna, and Yasna tries to, Yasna's very upset with Shallan and, tries to basically, what's the word? Guilt Shallan into leaving. And Shallan calls her out, and she's like, that soulcaster is a fake. And long story short, Shallan discovers that Yasna can somehow soulcast, tells Yasna, and when Yasna tries to deny it, Shallan tells her, I can do it too, and shows her. And Yasna realizes that Shallan, like herself, is a budding Night Radiant. And that soulcasting, they could do soulcasting not because they have the machine, the Fabrial, the soulcasters, but because they have Night Radiant powers, which are different from Kaladin's powers, coincidentally. And so Yasna decides to let Shallan in on the secrets that she's been investigating, and we discover at the very end of the book that Yasna has been researching the Voidbringers because she thinks that the Parshmen, the servants across all of Roshar that are docile and treated, like animals, basically, across all of Roshar, are actually the Voidbringers, the ancient mythological enemy of humanity.
Which is just...
Yeah, that's one hell of a whammy to end on. Oh, wait, no, there's one more whammy. So, the prelude we mentioned at the beginning, So one of the features of the prelude is that it talks about the 10 heralds and how all but one of them survived the very last. What was it? The Recreants? Was it called?
No, that was the.
Anyway, that all but one of them survived the last battle, but they are oath-bound to continue fighting every time with each recurrence, and each is brought back from the dead after they die in these battles. Only one of them died this time, and the rest of them decide to abandon their oath. And in order to avoid the recurrence of the Recreants. You know, these big apocalyptic battles that have been wearing them down for millennia. Desolations, that's it. Desolations. No, the Recreants is when all the Knights Radiant.
Yeah, the Recreants is the abandoning of the Oath of the Knight Radiant. Ahara Etiam is the final destiny. Is the final destination. No items. The last desolation.
Yes. Anyways, so all but one of the heralds abandon their oaths, and there are no more desolations for 4,000 years. But then, in the epilogue of the book, the last herald, the one who didn't abandon his oath and was dead, comes back to herald the incoming desolation.
And he says, I love that line at the very end. He says, "My name is Telenalat Elin. I am a herald of the Almighty, and I have failed."
Like, if any of them, my dude, it's like my dude. Fucking
like it, like Talon is low-key. I mean, not even low-key. He is just probably one of the most blatantly heroic individuals in recent fantasy.
He endured 4,000 plus years of torture before finally breaking. Because the heralds enduring torture in hell was what delayed the desolations. And whenever one of them broke, they were all resurrected and a new desolation started.
Also said
this dude endured torture on his own for 4,000 years.
Prior to this, he was the only one to never break, and the other 9 are said to be like kings and priests and like leaders. Of all of them, he was not a king of any kind or leader. So he was the one who was not meant to bear their burden, but held it the longest.
Yeah, he kind of just like showed up and was like, "Hey, you guys doing that whole saving the world thing? Yeah, you got room for one more?" You know, they kind of needed to round it out with 10 because, you know, they need that, and one of the guys didn't show up, and like, yeah, they kind of just ended up doing it to fill space. But as it turns out, he was better than all of them put together.
He's associated with Knights Radiant, literally the ones that will be like, we will die, but we will stand where others fall, is like a projected oath.
Yeah, that tracks for him.
Like everything about who Telenalat Elin is about endurance and like
sacrifice.
He has more determination than like 90% of shonen protagonists.
Sure. Oh, like there's not a protagonist out there.
I would argue maybe Luffy. Maybe.
Maybe.
But yeah, basic.
The one I could really argue a point.
But the basic idea is he managed to hold out for 4,500 years by sheer force of will, and basically created an unprecedented situation where human civilization had time to develop for the first time since the desolations
began. Before this it was like Bronze Age at best, and now it's like straight up late medieval, early Renaissance technology.
Except that Fabrials kind of throw it all out the window because they have like a lot of anachronistic technology thanks to the Fabrials, because they have a
wristwatch.
They have a wristwatch.
And
they have powered heating. They have
cell phones.
Kind of.
Kind of.
It's more telegraph.
Yeah,
telegraph specifically. Yes.
Telegraph. I can see.
It's basically email.
It is. Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, technology is all kinds of whack
Which,
because of the magic.
funnily enough, makes use of what is essentially quantum entanglement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's weird, huh?
It's really fun. Crazy shit.
If only he put as much effort into his research on certain mental illnesses as he did into his research on quantum mechanics. But that's not for another 3 books.
That's neither here nor there.
I mean, we were gushing about Talonel. I just kind of I just say the whole name sometimes, but like in
Town.
like a town, like in a Stormlight tarot deck, he's the Hanged Man for a reason.
Yeah, that about seems about right. Yeah.
But yeah, like the Stormlight Archives, fucking amazing books. Gotta love them.
Really good shit.
We literally just spent 2 hours on just the summary, huh?
On just The Way of Kings.
On just the summary of the first book, which is the shortest.
Yep.
Guys, I feel like
we're gonna need an extended episode.
Yeah, I feel like we're probably 1 episode per book was probably potentially not a wise decision.
Oh man.
I mean, look at it this way. We managed to compress 45 hours of plot into 2.
Yeah, no, I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying, like, if we're gonna cover a single book in another episode, we should probably do an extended episode.
And also, I'm just like, is anyone else worried that he's like not gonna live long enough to finish it at the rate he's going? Because there's 7 books left, and if they come out,
he does have someone reserved.
He does have some people in reserve, but like, it's getting to the point where I'm worried even his dude in reserve is not necessarily going to be able to handle it because.
Brandon isn't that old. He's only in his 40s.
Yeah, but he's
been doing a Stormlight book every, I think, 2-3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that would
and
make
he has
him
6 books left.
Let's say 3 years. That would put him in his mid-60s by the time Stormlight is over, and that's still not accounting for at least 1 other epic fantasy series.
I mean, he still has to write Dragonsteel.
Yes, that's what I was talking about. He still needs to write a 7-book epic fantasy series between.
Not to mention 7 more Mistborn books at minimum.
Mm-hmm.
No. Oh yeah. Oh my God! I completely forgot that we have 1 entire phase of Mistborn before the space opera.
Yeah, we have the entire second trilogy.
The modern trilogy that still needs to be done, and then the future trilogy after that. He's not even finished with the Western trilogy, the quartet.
And he needs to also write the sequel. He also wants to write a sequel to Warbreaker.
And Elantris, and that's just like the planned stuff, because as he's gone on record saying, Wax and Wayne was supposed to be standalone. He turned that into 4
Wax and Wayne was so good. Wax and Wayne was so good, though.
Wax and Wayne was a happy accident, I think was the phrasing that he used. It was just supposed to be a one and done project that he was doing for, to just take it easy between the Stormlight Archive books.
I don't think he knows what that means.
And, it ended up becoming a, like he said, it was supposed to be like a hamburger, but it evolved into a steak dinner.
And remember, he also has a YA novel series.
He has multiple.
No, he has 2. He had Reckoner, now he's working on Skyward.
Which is pretty good all on its own.
Yeah, like, I kind of like Skyward.
He also has to...
Okay, so yeah.
Also, his Alcatraz and the Dark Librarians series, that's also not finished yet. That's got at least 1 more book. He's been wanting to do a sequel to The Rhythmatist. He's working on the Dark One graphic novel. Like,
he wrote a novella.
He has attention deficit creator disorder. Like,
he's
hardcore.
written novellas.
He's basically, yeah, and he's. I think he talked about it in his last newsletter update that he basically said that he's going to need to take a lot of his ancillary ideas, and he's, either co-writing them, or he's going to,
produce them.
do like novellas for some of the extended stories that are not related to the big core stories that he wants to tell, because he just doesn't have the time to write all of them.
Okay, so looking at the release window, it's a Stormlight book every 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
He's written 10 short stories in the Cosmere since 2006.
Mm-hmm. Not to mention a long trip in Warbreaker, the entire first Mistborn trilogy, 3 of the 4 Wax and Wayne books, and 4 Stormlight Archive books, which are all massive.
Which I believe the total word count of
Warbreaker was actually released after the Mistborn original trilogy. Huh.
Mistborn was written first, before Stormlight was.
What's
the
word
and he also
count
took the time to fit. He also finished the Wheel of Time.
We can discuss this stuff off stream because, oh man, this is going long.
Yeah, so I think we can sum up our stream by saying Stormlight Archive's really good. Go read it. It's $2.99 on Kindle, or free with an Audible credit.
Very good. It's worth it. Just please watch.
Also, it's probably the best bang for your buck Audible credit you could ever do.
Oh, absolutely. Like $3 for a book that lasts you a long ass time. Definitely worth it.
And it'll give you
credits like $15.
It'll give you material to talk about with your friends for years. I mean, a group of friends and I have discussed Oathbringer for the last 3.
Yeah, that's been fun.
Right, Fuzzy?
Yes, I was just gonna say, we know this from experience. Is is a gift that keeps on giving. And another gift that keeps on giving is our dear audience, if they ever exist. I mean, on the subject of quantum entanglement and quantum uncertainty, our audience both does and does not exist until we get numbers we like, at which point we can claim that they exist. But thank you for joining us. Thank you to Aerith, our guest co-host for the Way of Kings retrospective. Thank you again
so much for having me.
Thank you again for, taking time off to do this. Thank you, Jack, for joining me, and please avoid making eye contact with the duck. We're not sure what it would do in such a situation. Thank you, everybody.
Why should I make eye contact? Oh, God!
We will now say goodnight and make funeral arrangements for Jack. Thank you. Have a good night. See you.
Bye.
Bye.